இப்பொழுது மிக முக்கியமான ஒரு தருணம். ஒட்டுமொத்த கருத்தரங்கத்தையும் உள்வாங்கிக் கொண்டு முன்னாள் கேரள மாநிலத்தினுடைய கல்வி அமைச்சர் அவர்கள் தங்களுடைய அனுபவத்தோடு சார்ந்து ஒரு வாழ்த்துறையை இங்கே வழங்க இருக்கின்றார்கள். அதற்கு முன்பாக 2 அறிவிப்புகள். பாரதி புத்தகாலயம் கல்வி சம்பந்தப்பட்ட பல புத்தகங்களை விற்பனைக்காக வெளியே வைத்திருக்கிறார்கள். முக்கியமாக புதிய புத்தகம் பேசுறதுல எஸ் ராஜகோபாலனுடைய வாழ்க்கை வரலாறை தொகுத்து அவர்கள் இந்த மாத புத்தகம் பேசுகிறதுல அவங்க வெளியிட்டிருக்காங்க. அது எல்லாமே விற்பனைக்கு இருக்கின்றன. கேரளாவில் குளித்துறை டயோசி, அதுதான் என்னை பொறுத்தவரை இந்தியாவில் முதல் டயோசி. கேட்ஸ் சம்பந்தமாகவும் புதிய கல்விக் கொள்கை சம்பந்தமாகவும் ஒரு சீரியஸான ஒரு டிஸ்கஷனை அவங்க நடத்தினாங்க. அந்த குளித்துறை மறை மாவட்டத்திற்கு உட்பட்ட அனைத்து தாளாளர்களையும் அழைத்து ஒரு விவாதத்தை நடத்தினார்கள். எப்படி இந்த விஷயத்தை எதிர்கொள்வது என்பதை பற்றி அவங்க ஒரு டாக்குமெண்டே ரெடி பண்ணியிருக்காங்க. ஒரு கன்னியாகுமரியில் இருந்து அவர்கள் இன்றுதான் காலையில திரும்ப 5 மணி ட்ரெயின்ல பல்வேறு இடர்பாடுக்கு இடையில போறாங்க. அந்த மறை மாவட்டத்திலிருந்து இங்கே வருகை தந்திருக்கக்கூடிய அந்த மறை மாவட்டத்தினுடைய கார்ப்பரேட் மேனேஜர் ஃபாதர் சுரேஷ், அதே போன்ற ஃபாதர் சகாயதாஸ், ஃபாதர் டென்சிங், ஃபாதர் ஜெனிஃபர் எடிசன், ஃபாதர் ஜெகன் போஸ் ஆகியோரை மேடைக்கு வருமாறு உங்களுடைய பலத்த கலோரியோடு அழைக்கின்றேன். அதே போல சகோதரி குழந்தை தெரசு அவர்கள் அவங்க போன்ல சண்டையே போட்டாங்க. எங்களெல்லாம் பார்த்தா மனுஷனா தெரியலையா, எங்களுக்கு ஏன் அழைப்பு அனுப்பல அப்படின்னு சொல்லி கேட்டாங்க. அருட்சகோதரி குழந்தை தெரசு அவர்களையும் மேடைக்கு வருமாறு அன்போடு அழைக்கின்றேன். தோழர் முரளிதரன், தோழர் ஜெயக்குமார், அவங்க 2 பேரும் கன்னியாகுமரியிலிருந்து வந்திருக்கிறாங்க. தோழர் முரளிதரனை மட்டும் கூப்பிட்டேன்னா மாசா முனுசாமி இருக்கிறாரு, இன்னும் பேராசிரியர் ராஜு இருக்காரு, நிறைய பேர் இங்க இருக்கிறாங்க. அதனாலதான் நான் வேற யாரையும் நான் கூப்பிடல. அருட்தந்தை அவர்கள் இங்க வருவது என்பது எப்படி இந்திய மக்கள் ஒரு ஒற்றுமையோடு இந்த கல்விக் கொள்கையை எதிர்கொள்ள போகிறோம் என்கின்ற அந்த ஒரு ஒருமைப்பாட்டிற்காகத்தான். பிரச்சனை I request Comrade M.A. Baby to greet us.
Dr. N. Mani, Dr. P. Datna Sabhabadi, Professor Anil Sadgopal, Thiru S. Shaktivel, Professor Ramanujam, and other friends and comrades. I don't propose to make any lengthy speech or elaborate presentation, which, like all of you, I am also aware that it is not necessary now, because the main purpose of this get together has been achieved. That is to discuss the challenges facing higher education. At the very outset, I would like to congratulate State Platform for Common School System and Tamil Nadu Science Forum for having taken the initiative in organizing this particular seminar, which all of us have now understood how important and relevant it is after having heard the presentations made by all the eminent and qualified speakers. I would only like to take few minutes fully agreeing with all the formulations made and presentations presented. As mentioned here, I would like to very briefly mention, is there any alternative other than relentless struggles by concerned sections of society, stakeholders, students, teachers, educationists, and general public? as and when we have, with very limited power and authority, some local bodies or provincial governments, we should experiment with that possibility to intervene and correct the wrong educational policies which are sought to be imposed on our society by forces of capitalist domination. In this context, I would like to very briefly mention some experience of the last left-front government. But before doing so, I would like to briefly add about the calamity, especially in Indian context, that would befall if we are not successful in preventing the WTO from making higher education a tradable service. Our purpose is to carry on this struggle, and a lot of optimism has been generated that we would be able to do that. In that context, I would also like to recall our very recent experience, two experiences. One, a broad platform of peasant organization and various other non-governmental organizations coming together and carrying out series of struggles, as a result of which Mr. Narendra Modi was compelled to state through his minister that the very retrogressive and sinister amendments which they wanted to effect in the Land Acquisition Act. So this shows that people's struggles can be successful. It's a very important success that through peasant organizations and their unity, the unity is very important, we are able to achieve. In the context of education, very recently a significant success has been achieved by the students and people of South Africa against the fee rise that the South African government wanted to effect. When I say this, South African government is led by African National Congress with the participation of the South African Communist Party. That is also an important lesson. Even a relatively progressive government was compelled to take, I don't say neoliberal policies in the field of education. I have my, scientifically now there is a meaning for neoliberal, but I would like to use extreme capitalist policies. Because Professor Anil was mentioning about linguists stating that how effectively they would come with euphemism to hoodwink people. I think neoliberal, we understand the sinister meaning of neoliberal policies, but those words carry some positive meaning also for innocent people. Because liberal, what do we mean by when we say that he is a liberal and things like that? Anyway, that's a different, entirely different topic. But extreme capitalist policies should be undertaken by even some progressive governments like the South African government. Progressive in inverted commas, I would say, because I have my own reservations about the policies of the South African government. But they definitely have progressive sections, Communist Party, trade union movement in South Africa and all that. They were compelled to impose heavy fee hike, but the students, teachers and various other sections of South Africa struggled strenuously and they were successful in reversing most of the decision. And I am coming after attending a conference in Istanbul, it's a Communist and Workers' Party's meeting, where we discussed these issues in the field of education, how disadvantaged sections are denied their opportunity to continue their education, especially in the higher segment. So, our own recent experience show that through struggles, we can reverse certain sinister policies. So, with that confidence, we should carry forward this particular struggle. There is a very interesting situation with regard to Indian Constitution and international treaties. When this Dangal draft got circulated and the entire negotiation from transforming GATT into WTO happened, we used to work among the parliament members in Delhi. And at that point of time, we realized that there is a major problem with Indian constitution with regard to international treaties. In majority of countries in the world, if the government representative, whether it's a minister or a higher official entrusted by the government, sign an international treaty, it automatically won't come into operation in the concerned country. There has to be a parliamentary ratification, or in the case of few countries like United States, a Senate committee has to ratify it. That means even after an international treaty having been signed by the representative of a country, there is an opportunity for the people of that country to put pressure on the government from giving effect to that. For example, League of Nations could not go ahead with their activities because American Senate refused to ratify the content of League of Nations. That is why League of Nations finally collapsed and United Nations had to be developed later on. This is a classic example of how the ratification provision can come into operation. But strangely, there we have great, inspiration about some of the content of Indian Constitution, no doubt. It's a product of anti-imperialist struggle. Ambedkar, Pandit Nehru, many others participated in shaping it. But there is a major flaw in Indian Constitution, is that there is no ratification provision in Indian Constitution. As a Rajya Sabha member, I tried to move a private member's constitution amendment, and that was debated in Rajya Sabha, but that also met with the fate of most of the private members' legislative efforts. That was not carried. But another strange content of Indian Constitution is very, very counterproductive. What is that? We not only don't have a ratification provision in Indian Constitution, there is another dangerous provision that could be the product of that particular situation, because we were internationalists those days. What is that provision but? What does that read? If an international treaty in which we have become party, that comes into conflict with some provisions of Indian Constitution, then Indian Constitution can be amended. That is one provision in Indian Constitution. With this kind of a provision in Indian Constitution, unless we prevent education being put as part of tradable services and part of WTO, what would be the impact? Not only that, Indian Parliament won't be able to make any legislation, as we all know. On the contrary, Indian Parliament would be compelled to make legislation to give effect to the operation of education becoming a tradable service. This also is an important point we should be careful about. We should be campaigning this particular point also in the coming days. Now, a highly enlightening and inspiring presentation has been made by Professor Anil. And there it has been rightly stated that if these changes take shape in the field of education, higher education, students would become just consumers. That's true. That is very much true. Along with that, students will have another role also, another incarnation also, if I may say so. They would be considered by this capital as a raw material. A raw material to be processed and transformed and made into a product which is market friendly and capital friendly. They would say that you are an unfinished product, raw material. We take over the responsibility of, converting you into a product which would be marketable and which would be market friendly also. So apart from having the plight of being converted into a consumer and a user of services, students should be converted as raw materials also, to be sent through the industrial process with the Vice Chancellor as Chief Executive and overseeing how this product is processed and things like that. This also we have to take into consideration. I don't want to take much time about, how did we struggle to prevent certain policies of extreme capitalism getting reflected, while getting reflected in Kerala's education, what a 5-year left-front government could do. First of all, we brought one of the biggest problems in the field of education is we want the proliferation and strengthening of SFI, being a product of SFI. But there is a danger of the proliferation of another SFI, that is self-financing institution. So one of the important tasks of our government was to tame these self-financing institutions. The earlier Congress UDF government allowed them without any rules and regulation. Therefore, they started dictating rules and regulation. They means capital. Capital would be dictating rules and regulations. We brought in a legislation, part of which was naturally struck down by the Kerala High Court, because now the judicial process also is getting influenced by the rules of capital in capital letters, and whether part of capital also is playing a role in influencing the decisions of the court, I don't know. I don't want to opine upon that. But I have my own experience about that. That's a different matter. And all this problem cropped up after Supreme Court judgment on Inamdar case, where they said that self-financing institution, they start the institution with their money, government has no business even to claim that disadvantaged sections of students should also get admission. It's an atrocious pronouncement of the Supreme Court of India. If anybody wants to sue me, I don't mind. I am willing to go to court. It's an atrocious judgment made by Supreme Court of India, including the Chief Justice, then Chief Justice. And poor Arjun Singh brought a constitution amendment, but he did not pass any legislation following the Anyway, I don't want to go into the nitty-gritty of all that. So we, knowing fully well that when there is a Supreme Court verdict like this, if a state legislation adopts a law, there would be difficulties. But we were willing to face those difficulties. But thanks to certain provisions of that law, because High Court did not strike down all provisions of that law. So whatever remained, the mutilated provisions of the law passed by Kerala legislature, using that, we controlled the self-financing institutions to some extent. This is one thing I want to say. Now, the behavior of a government is very important, because to use that particular law, every year we had to negotiate with the self-financing management and bring them around and force them to sign an agreement with the government. That's how we run five years. But I will just give you one example how a UDF government will behave differently. We asked on the floor of the House after the first year of the UDF government, and they also signed agreement with the engineering, self-financing engineering colleges. Our question was, with the new fee structure agreement signed by self-financing institution and this government, what is the additional income of Kerala engineering colleges as a result of the new fee structure? The reply given on the floor of the House is 22 crore rupees. That was the additional income the new government handed over on a platter to self-financing. So this shows, through struggle, a progressive government can control the situation to some extent. A regressive government, which moves hand in glove with the forces of capital in the field of education, they would deal with this situation differently. Now, only bullet points. We started inter-university centers, 10 inter-university centers in Kerala. So far, only under UGC guidance, we have wonderful centers like Ayuka, where Dr. Jay Narlekar is heading that. Only after having gone there and studied how they are running that inter-university center, for the first time in any Indian state, a state government initiated this idea of inter-university center in every university of Kerala, and the present vice president, Dr. Hamid Ansari, when he inaugurated one inter-university center in Kannur, that was after 7 or 8 inter-university centers already have been inaugurated in different universities of Kerala. After he heard what we have done in higher education, he stated in the presence of the governor, I give A+ to what you are doing in the field of higher education. This is what the comment that the Honorable Chairman of Rajya Sabha and Vice President of our country stated. Then Higher Education Scholarship Fund, for the first time, Indian Prime Minister came and inaugurated that. The presentation has been made about the importance of +2. It's very important. It's strategically placed for the disadvantaged sections. Only if they are provided with admission and education for +2, they can continue professional education. We introduced, online admission, as a result of which, the most inspiring experience we have, every scheduled caste, scheduled tribe student sought admission in Kerala. Through online admission, we were able to give admission for +2 in Kerala. Similarly, we used to have admission for scheduled tribe students in medicine, but they never qualify. What did we do? For the first time, we noticed this. With the collaboration of scheduled tribe minister, we organized special coaching facility for students of scheduled caste and scheduled tribe, as a result of which there was no question of any seat remaining unfilled. All of them got filled. So these kind of interventions are possible. This is what we have shown in Kerala. Thank you very much for having given me this opportunity to share some of the experiences of Kerala LDF government. Thank you very much.